Hello and welcome to Angular Air. My name is Jeff Welpley. I am your host today. First, just a quick shout out to our sponsors. Our prime sponsor is Auth0. If you have any sort of authentication needs, definitely check them out at auth0.com. And also, we are sponsored by ThoughtRam. If you have any training needs, you can definitely check them out. They've had a busy couple of months. Actually had another team member join them, Thomas Burleson, who from Angular Material fame and Pluralsight, I think a bunch of other stuff that he's done in the community. So they get even stronger. They kill it with the blog posts, so definitely check out their blog. And actually, Pascal has been working on 5thingsangular.github.io for just like periodically, 5 kind of cool happening things in the world of Angular. So definitely recommend that as well. On today's show, it's going to be a little bit different. We're basically, instead of an interview, we're going to just have a discussion topic show. There's a couple of reasons for this that we'll get into in a little bit. But for our panel today, I am pleased to welcome in a new panelist, Justin Schwartzberger.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be here.
So Justin, to start off, since this is your first time on the show, why don't you give us kind of an introduction to yourself and let people know a little bit of who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Justin Schwartzberger. I'm a lead engineer at SoCreate. We're building a future screenwriting platform for writing screenplays, powered by Angular 2. I also do training videos that I put together for different outlets, currently putting a bunch together on Angular 2 for lynda.com. And just like to share knowledge and live in this world of that we're in with Angular 2, front-end development, all that goodness.
You also gave a great NGConf talk on, so you want to talk a little bit about what you went over at NGConf?
Yeah, sure. So I was excited to be able to talk there about Angular 2's fresh approach to style. I got an opportunity to share what Angular is doing with its CSS shim and how it scopes CSS to components that you write. So you have this ability to write CSS, use whatever kind of classes, other type of selectors that you want specifically for that component, and it kind of isolates that scoping out for it. So it was pretty cool to share that on stage and be around the community and engage with everybody about this topic. It was an awesome conference and great opportunity. And you guys spoke to, you guys did a great job. I always love your universal stuff. It's cool to learn about that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. We'll have a link up to your talk. If anybody who's watching has not seen it, you definitely should. But let's get into some happenings. So we have a bunch of topics we're going to talk about today of, stuff in the not only Angular world, but sort of the JavaScript community and things that people have been talking about, interested in recently. But first, I want to dive into kind of, for Justin and I, some of the things we've been working on, and that'll touch on some of these topics as well. So Justin, first, what are you mentioned a couple of things that you've been doing lately with training courses, but you want to give us kind of a rundown of what's the top of your mind these days?
Yeah, sure. So the most recent thing I'm kind of doing at work here is working on a style guide app that's going to kind of show patterns and practices for building, as we build this application, again, using Angular 2. And one of the interesting things that we're doing with that is we have this concept of global components in this application that we're building. And they're kind of like, I guess what people would consider like dumb components. I kind of like to refer to them as decoupled components, be a little nicer. But basically the idea that you have these components that are going to be reused throughout the app, that they really their whole interface is through input and output, right? And so we have these global components and we want to surface them in this style guide app that we can drive people to check out, but we want them to be functional. So actually running in this app, so outside of the actual native app that they're living in. And we also want to be able to scaffold like samples for them, right? So you have this global component that's going to display like a context menu, and you want to be able to show, here's the different stages that you could use this component in, right? If you give it these inputs or these outputs, it's going to look different. It's going to function a little different. So we wanted to be able to say, how can somebody build like sample components that represent the state of that and the implementation of that? So I'm using this the dynamic component loader, pulling in these global components, actually bringing in system.js into the code to load them on the fly as you kind of go through this menu and pick, I want to see this component, bring in this component along with all of its samples, which are actually Angular components that then will render on this in the style guide and kind of give us this ability to surface and see these global components in action.
So is the main thought that you're creating a reference implementation that people can model the style and the way that you're doing it? Or do you want people to actually reuse your components?
Yeah, so the concept would be that as our development team goes in and says, okay, I need to build a new tool in this application, right? It's going to be made up of some of these global components. So what do I have in my inventory? So I go to the style guide. I see those global components I can use to craft my tool component. And then what I can see different implementations of those, actually see the markup because of these sample components, copy paste that markup, bring that into my tool component and start using it and see it in those different fashions. So it's like using those existing global components to build greater tools components inside of this app.
Okay, so it's something you guys are using internally. Is it something that you are also going to expose any of that externally for other people to?
Yeah. So as we get kind of nailed down of how this thing works and that kind of this ideal workflow kind of way of the architecture of this style guide app, we want to put this thing out in there, open source it, kind of give it opportunity so other people can kind of use it and see what it's like and hopefully implement it and stuff like that. So we definitely want to share this code. So I'm kind of trying to get the foundation dialed in, and then I have to decouple it from our specific app, because there's some stuff specific for our style guide feel, and then throw that out there and hopefully people can share that knowledge, people can learn from it and use it. So hopefully.
That'd be awesome, man. Definitely publish the link when we'll retweet that from the Angular Air account.
Cool.
What else do you have going
on? So other than that, I currently have 2 Angular 2 training courses up on lynda.com for subscribers over there. And I'm in the process of building a 3rd one right now. I have one on essential training, Angular 2, one on Angular 2 forms, diving into the model-driven approach of forms. And I'm currently working on the data-driven app, where we're going to kind of dive into HTTP and observables, and kind of on the fence whether I'm going to do the whole Redux thing or not, but kind of deciding on that too. So,
yeah. Cool. All right. Anything else on your plate?
Those are the main things right now, Angular Air, obviously. So, yeah, and then just, cruising forward. Actually, I do some writing as well. We got a local writers conference coming up in September, and I'm debating on whether I can fit in enough time to do a submission for creative writing for that. So I might work that in if I have time, but that would be the other thing. So.
Oh, that's cool. So you basically dog food your own product as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's why this whole product is very interesting to me, is because I love writing. So it's really kind of best of both worlds. I do the software development, so it just all comes together.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And as far as Angular Air goes, the background story there is that I've known Justin for a little while from other conferences that we've met. And we got paired up as buddies before the conference, where all the speakers were paired up with someone else who would review their talk and give feedback and that type of thing. And Justin gave great feedback as always. And, it was good to talk to him ahead of time. And then during the conference, not only did I enjoy his talk, we had like a long conversation at one of the bars afterwards. And I just couldn't help getting his silky smooth voice out of my head. And I was like, this must be on the show. So I convinced him to join us. So hopefully he'll be on a lot more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And, we actually met in person at Angular U.
Yes.
And we actually kind of paired up there because you guys tweeted out, hey, we're looking for somebody to come down, give us some feedback. And so we jumped on that one night and actually got to go over your talk for that there. So that was pretty cool. So now we've done it twice.
Yeah. I owe you. So speaking of Angular Air, going to some of the stuff that I've been up to, there's been a number of things. I mean, so we did Have a couple weeks here. We're off schedule. Like, so obviously this show is being recorded, not on our normal day. We're a little bit out of sync, and that's for a couple reasons. One of which being that we're in the process of changing some of the format for the show. So, I'm not going to go over everything right now, but the basic thing is that up until now, we've done interview style, which has been worked great. And I think we've had some great shows with really interesting people. But I wanted to try to figure out a way to better leverage kind of some of the unique aspects of this particular show, which includes, it being live sometimes, including some live elements, having the actual video there. So we're going to mix up things a little bit that we'll still have interview style shows moving forward, but we're going to mix in a couple other formats. One of them being this one like today, where we do just discussion style and have just like topics that our panel kind of go over and talk about. So I'll be interested to get feedback from everybody listening on, what they think about that. And then there'll be one additional format, which will be tutorial style. Basically, we're trying to set up something where the guests that come on will have a couple of tutorials prepared, and they'll actually go over them sort of like almost like Egghead style during the show, except that as opposed to Egghead, which is like everything's kind of pre-planned or plural set or whatever, it's more kind of on the fly where you're showing it, and then we can kind of give feedback on the fly, and hopefully it will create a dynamic where the panel and the presenter can kind of interact and go in different directions than even the original presenter thought about, which is sort of the goal. So we'll see how that works. We're going to try it out a couple times over the course of the next couple of months and get some feedback from everybody listening, and then we'll see from there. Now, so that's taken some time. Also, what is at play is that, just like Justin, I work for a startup, and we're in a fundraising round, or we're trying to raise money right now. So as CTO, that takes up a lot of my time, and way more than I thought, really. And this is a topic that kind of diverges a little bit from Angular, but I know that a lot of people listening, are working for startups, are working for, kind of entrepreneurial endeavors. So I won't go too far into this, but the only thing I'll say is that this is my first time doing it, and just the process of going through this and like figuring out, how to talk to investors, how to present your company, has been amazing learning experience, and has kind of made us better for it. So I definitely would recommend people who are of the entrepreneurial mindset. I've always been a bootstrapper, kind of trying to just get things done on our own. But if you do have the opportunity to actually pitch other people, there can be a lot of value to that, and then I would highly recommend it. And you can feel free to ping me with questions. That's the other thing I found, is that people that have gone through the process have been extremely helpful and beneficial in offering up advice. A lot of people within the Angular community, in fact. So definitely leverage that. And then the last thing I was going to mention that I've been working on for a lot of the Angular Universal stuff, that Patrick and I's library for doing server rendering. There's been a lot of activity there on the side. A couple of the major things that are going on there is we're placing a big emphasis on the CLI now, where we're trying to smooth over the sort of common pain that people have with, well, not just Universal, like Angular 2 as well, that initial setup and kind of overcoming the hurdle of the build process and all these build tools like Webpack, System.js, like everything you might not be familiar at, just getting over that hurdle. And the CLI helps a lot with that, as kind of, if you saw the ngconf talk from Mike Bracco. So that's coming along. It's not there yet where people can use it yet, but in the coming month or so, you should start to see something there. Then the other kind of really two quick things on the Angular Universal side is that we are starting to build out a sort of set of services and utilities above the Universal library. What we're realizing is that people who are building, universal apps and this is something I mentioned in my NGConf talk, that there's a lot of common problems that people run into or common challenges. And the reality is that there are these set of services that everybody needs, things to modify, like the canonical URL and the head tag, like there's a million things related to either SEO or something performance based that we're starting to endeavor to create at least a version of those that everybody can start from and then kind of override with your unique requirements. So that's going to be coming down the road. And then the last thing is I've just been doing a lot of refactoring for the pre-boot library within Angular Universal. John Goiter, who's from the community, has helped to enable it to be multi-app so that you can have multiple Angular 2 apps on the server side, which is going to be cool. And then I've been actually, the one kind of interesting thing is that I'm doing right now is I'm trying to optimize the size of pre-boot, because pre-boot is inlined in your server view, so it has to be as small as possible. And right now, I think it's like 20K, which is too big. So I am almost there with reducing it down to about 2K, like basically an order of magnitude, which is going to be so. I mean, as you could imagine, I had to really get tricky with how I wrote my JavaScript, with that inline piece of pre-boot, so that it's like as small as possible. So yeah, that was interesting. All right, that's it for updates for me. Let's get into topics. So the way this is going to work is I'm just going to bring up a couple things that have been happening, and then get Justin's initial feedback, and I'll add my 2 cents as well. So, Justin,
Yes.
First up is Google I/O.
Google
Did you get a chance to watch any of the talks for Google I/O?
I've seen parts of a few. I haven't actually got a chance to watch through them yet. Kind of read through the summary of everything, that kind of got the gist of everything that was covered in that. But
yeah, so even if you didn't see any of the videos, like there's a certain set of like topics, high level topics that were hit on constantly throughout the conference, and that's really what we're going to talk about.
Cool.
So the first one is VR, virtual reality. So like virtual reality, I mean, Facebook is playing a big emphasis on VR. Google I/O announced that they were creating this thing called Daydream, which is a mobile VR platform. I guess I'm curious, Justin, what your thoughts are on VR in general, and what's going on both at Google and Facebook, and in some of these other areas.
Yeah. So I guess related to that, we went to Build this year. We've been going to Build for the past few years, and they have the whole HoloLens thing, and so kind of from the Microsoft side of that. It's interesting. We saw this presentation on the HoloLens, and kind of we're thinking about that in terms of, well, what does that mean for a developer in terms of this VR space, and what are you building for it and stuff like that. And obviously in that stack, it was very, I mean, Microsoft has their, universal type stuff for the JavaScript stuff. So you're like, well, maybe that's going to be a possibility as a front end developer. Can I bring apps to that space, right? But I think on the Google side of things, immediately kind of start thinking about, well, they feel like their ecosystem is very front end developer friendly, right? Like, what's that story going to be like? Can I start building Angular 2 apps and actually get them into there as well? And that might be
Angular 2 on VR. That would be
like maybe that's a possibility, right? Or what what would I use that in terms of a application type platform, right? Or hardware system platform for delivering, whatever I'm building, sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I the key thing in my mind when I think about VR is when is going to make, well, 2 things. First of all, the from a hardware perspective, the hardware right now is super expensive, and so you have the early adopters, people who are super into it, which is mostly people, gamers, right?
Right.
And it's only when they get to the point where the technology is advanced enough and they're able to bring down the costs when it is going to really, even have a chance to explode. Like at the current price point, it's just not feasible. But I think they're okay with that because they're still working out a lot of the technology as a whole.
Right.
And then the other thing is that when does it make that leap from just games to augmented reality or like, some of the stuff like more practical use.
Right.
So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I know that from the VC perspective, I mean, one of the things that, because of what we've been doing, like I have started to be tuned into like what VCs are starting to be like really interested in. VR is one of those things that like, there's a lot of interesting, a lot of people that are believers basically in the future.
Yeah, it feels like it's stuck around for a while, long enough now that it's now permeating through. That it's like, okay, this is on the radar, right? This is some level of importance. It's going to be here. It's coming, you know, and yeah, how do we work that into this whole process, right?
Yep. All right. Second topic for Google I/O, or second thing of four, basically, that I was going to bring up is AI. So AI has always been part of Google underneath the scenes, you know, with its search engine, with, you know, different parts of its products. But there's a couple of interesting things that they came out with during Google I/O. Two in particular. One was a messaging chatbot. Like, it seems like everybody's coming out with a chatbot now. Right. This thing called Allo. Maybe I'm saying that right? Allo, whatever. And then and Allo uses this thing, Google Assistant, which is this AI backend. And then the other thing is Google Home. So like, just like Amazon's, what's the thing that Amazon has? Do you?
Echo.
Echo. Yeah.
It's got Alexa
like,
in it.
Yeah. So similar type of idea, this thing that you can talk to and get feedback and whatever. So what's your thoughts on AI, messaging, these devices, and that type of thing?
Yeah. Okay. So with the AI, it's really interesting, right? Because we got bots for all the things now, right? That's the hotness, right? And again, referencing Build, we were up at Build and Microsoft announced they have this whole bot ecosystem that they're trying to launch as well. And then now Google's got the same sort of thing, and it's like, yeah, everybody's on this craze. It's interesting, having been around for a long time, right? That like, remember bots back in the days of ICQ and AIM and all this stuff, right? We've had bots for a while now, so it's like, why are they so hot now? But I think it's the integration of, you know, that concept with what Slack brought, and, you know, HipChat and all these things. It's aggregating all that data together and providing a message system, a communication system that now can do all the things, right? So I think, you know, it's definitely interesting. One thing I like with the Google products and what they've done with that, I recently switched to an Android-based phone, probably 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and it's really nice having that integration point of these different things. Even something as simple as inbox and mail to reply quickly with a, you know, suggested reply that this thing's popular. That's what I immediately think of when I think of this new integrated AI into chat that they're showing and doing, is that they do that same sort of thing in inbox, right? And I found that to be pretty useful, that it actually can kind of identify, oh yeah, that response will work fine. Okay, I can just hit that and be on my way. And so for chat to be able to kind of quickly respond to certain things, it's cool. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, do they provide that then hook? You know, how, as a developer, can I easily write in these hooks to say, within this chat experience, can I provide other things like, how's my build doing, or, you know, or kick off something here, or notify there, you know, how the integration, I mean, that story is pretty cool. So it's always cool to see that open up as a possibility, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think we're only at the beginning.
Right.
Like, I think that the usage of both, in my mind, the messaging thing and the Google Home thing are like two different UIs for the same type of interface, like this conversational interface, either through your conversational interface is either typing the message or talking. But in the back end, it's the same thing. You're talking to some sort of either automated or fully automated or AI system, or, you know, one common thing that a lot of people are doing is this AI human hybrid, where the thing on the back end, it tries to use some level of AI, but then there's humans backing it in some way.
Okay.
That's sort of the common thing. This is another huge area. In fact, I'd love to do like a whole show just on this. Like, I have a lot of thoughts myself. The one thing, I guess, or two things, I guess I'll restrict my comments to, is that we at Get Human, you know, do this. We've talked to a lot of other people, And I really enjoyed talking to this one particular guy who used to be the head of product at Go Butler, which is, a messaging platform for doing virtual assistant stuff. And he wrote a blog post, which I'll include a link to, that he basically talked about the state of the industry and then talked about where these types of interfaces aren't necessarily the best way. Like there's some people who go crazy. They go overboard. They're using then chat for like everything, and chat isn't necessarily the best interface all the time.
Right.
And then the last thing I was going to mention is just that we're at the point where the stuff that can be easily automated is starting to, like where you can connect up these services where it is already kind of online. The much harder thing is fulfillment for things that are not necessarily like automated. So like it used to be that things like in the real world, like delivery and whatever was part of that. But now, because the logistics of that, like there's services that are being built on top of these human services, and you can hook into those things that are built on top of the human services, then that works. But there's still all sorts of different stuff that's just inaccessible right now because there's no kind of hook into it per se.
Right.
And so I think in addition to the AI and messaging technology itself and the voice technology improving over time, you're also going to see vast improvements as people build on top of these previously inaccessible areas. So anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they need to expose that data or expose those. And get up on speed. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So one thing on the home thing, because I didn't touch on that. It's interesting because I've thought about the Echo. A few of my friends have the Echo and they love that thing and the Amazon product, right? And I was about to pick one up, and then with this announcement for Google's, Home, that's like, okay, well, now maybe I should wait. And of course, with everything in technology, right? You're about to pull the trigger, but it's going to change. Something new is going to come out 3 months from now, 4 months from now. So you just kind of live with it. But there's been a lot of buzz out there that people's initial reaction that I've seen has been like, oh man, this thing's going to destroy the Amazon Echo, and it's going to be so much better. So now it's going to be cool. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how much, how cool it is. So.
Yeah, that is interesting. I haven't talked to anybody who has one yet. So I have seen some of those comments online, but I maybe a Christmas present.
Yeah, there you go.
So put that on the list. Yep. Okay. Third topic from Google I/O, car automation. So Google has been trying to do self-driving car for a while. There's other companies that are kind of getting into the game too, like Uber. There was a company called Cruise that was bought by GM, I want to say. Basically, whether I think mainstream people just out there who aren't kind of paying attention probably don't see this coming tidal wave of automated driving cars that is like definitely coming. But people that are in the industry, seeing some of these things happening, really the only reason why it hasn't kind of exploded is that I think there's some regulation that they're still trying to go through. There's like 4 levels of automation where level 4 is like fully automated where there's like no driver. I think, and that's further out. I think the thing that is sort of the pending wave of explosion is the level 3. Level 2 is in cars right now where they do like enhanced cruise control, like some extra stuff so you don't go out of your lane and that type of thing. So that's in cars now. Level 3 is like a little bit more advanced where like you could take, you still have to be in the driver's seat, but it can do almost everything, for you. And you have to kind of assist in a couple things. So a lot of the big focus right now getting out is, level 3, and then just various stuff involved with, software in the car. So in addition to automated cars, at Google I/O, they talked about Android Auto, which is just software platform for cars, basically, which has been pretty big. So do you keep on up on any of this, Justin?
Well, I drive a car, so there's that, right? Yeah, I do a little bit. I think that it's interesting. I hope that that other part, the very last part that you mentioned, which is the integration, right, of the software and stuff like that, like integration with your phone, with your car, doesn't just get leapfrogged over. Because right now there's some there, but really, before I get an automated car, what I would really love to have is just be able to play my jams on there from my phone with a slick interface, be able to receive and reply to text messages, all through the interface of my car, and get that all dialed in, and it seems like that's doesn't have enough tension right now, and it's like, okay, man, do the automated car thing, but also make sure you do this part too. So it sounds like they're attacking that as well. So that's a big thing for me. I'd want, but then I think for me, I would have to step into, I guess I would want to jump into like level 2 first, right? Like I want to get in a car first and see it parallel park for me and like feel comfortable with that first, So it's like almost I want to experience as a user level 2, level 3, level 4 before I like fully commit to level 4, right, of a fully automated car. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see because I mean, I haven't even been in a car yet that will self park. And so it'd be interesting to see how that feels and that experience is, because there's that level of trust, right? The human trust with the machine and more so, especially in driving, more so the trust of what the other guy or girl is doing in the other lane, right? Like that would be the biggest worry is like, yeah, your car may be going straight, but how does it react to this? And I guess that would be like what, level 3, in terms of how it's doing that.
Yeah, I don't know how driving is around by you. You're in San Bernardino, is that right?
San Luis Obispo, Central Coast of California.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I don't know how driving is around there, but in Boston, yeah, people are crazy. So like, you almost get this like spidey sense after a while, like watching, like you could like almost look at their eyes and you can see, okay, that guy, he's going to do something crazy. I know he's going to do something crazy. Like I'm going to slow down and like let it go by. So yeah, there's that type of stuff that I'm sure is going to be a continued learning process. But one thing that's clear, so I think the timing of things is probably debatable. But one thing that I would find it hard to debate against is that eventually we're going to get to like fully automated cars. I mean, that's just like, I just couldn't imagine how that would not happen. And the funny thing there is that, there's a lot of people, younger people who joke that they may never have to learn how to drive a car at all, right?
Right.
Like if that's like, within the next 10 years and that type of thing. So
right.
That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I could see it possibly not happening is if it gets jumped over by something like Hyperloop, right? We got a bunch of micro Hyperloops everywhere that becomes public transportation, and maybe now you don't have cars even in the mix, right? Because there's a replacement. I don't know.
Or teleportation.
Right? Yeah, there's that.
Teleportation,
too, right?
Then it's like game over, right?
And then talk about being scared about it, test driving that, right?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Okay, and then the last item from Google I/O was, this is like a combo thing, and it basically has to do with apps that there's a couple different teams with different philosophies within Google with regard to building apps, and there is a strong contingent on the web side, with the Chrome team and Angular team as well, basically advocating for progressive web apps, essentially not necessarily building mobile at all, native. This is, just to keep on building on top of the web platform, enhancing the web platform, building offline apps with just web technologies. So you have that sort of thing that was promoted like pretty heavily during Google I/O. And then the other thing is, I mean, they still have a big Android. Obviously Android is huge within Google, and they have Android Instant Apps now. Just another innovation there, so people don't have to like fully download an app in order to experience some part of the functionality. It's sort of coming the other way from the problem, where you have some sort of like almost like web-like experience with native apps. It is an interesting take, but what are your thoughts on this, Justin? What are you betting your future on?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to see that the web is back in this rejuvenation of getting attention again. I mean, we started this big movement for the past few years about apps, native apps getting a lot of attention. And I think that's great. You know, I'm glad there's native apps. I think there's still a place for them. I'm not against them. But I love seeing the fact that the web is being promoted again, and it's being like, okay, now let's bring this back in the mix and say, look, we've got a platform, we've got this awesome scenario where you can iterate and deliver changes to your application fast, and the barrier to people getting them up and running is minimum, because they can just get right there in the browser, and now to have this ability to do these things on these mobile devices, but writing these front end kind of code and stuff. I'm glad that there's this passion and being driven by these bigger companies like Google and stuff, by talking about this and having that discussion and saying, hey, look, there's still tons of place for this. So as a front end developer, that's obviously great, right? It's interesting in terms of this small delivery of this the application that you get from like native apps, right? That they're talking about doing. I mean, my initial thought immediately is about like, okay, well, isn't that kind of like a demo trial sort of thing? Like, okay, you get to see it, but what it goes delivered to me fast, but what am I getting at? Am I going to want that? Am I just kind of looking at it to see a more like interactive screenshot essentially, or an interactive video at that point of the app to kind of really make my decision on if I want to buy it or not? I'm kind of still digesting like what is the benefit of that?
I mean, I guess they're trying to get over the hurdle. I honestly don't know. Like you, I don't know how much of a problem this is per se, but get over the hurdle, mental hurdle of people like, oh, do I really want to download this app? Like, what if I just want to try a whole bunch of different ones out? Something along those lines. We like on the web, you can go to like 50 different web pages really quick. Right. But it's probably a harder sell to like actually download 50 apps and then delete them. Like people just don't do that. So I think that's, at least that's my impression.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, I don't do a lot of app downloading. I mean, I have occasionally here and there, but I don't know. I kind of go for the things that I know functionally that I need, and then I kind of live with them, sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see though. And then they said that from some of the stuff I read is that they were kind of implying that as a developer, and you kind of always do this, right? The company's feeding the Kool-Aid, but implied that it won't be that hard for developers to implement this feature into their application. So, I mean, that's always another concern as an app developer is how easy am I going to be able to give this little trial version of it out there and implement that in my existing code. But it kind of sound like they have a solution for that. So, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, there's I can't. I've thought about many times the mobile app future because of just it's relevant to what we're going to do at work. I've debated so many times in my head like how much we want to. I mean, basically, what it comes down to is that look, the web platform is ideal. Like overall, I mean, take everything else out of it. If the web platform gave you the same level of performance, same level of functionality, I mean, it's no brainer. Like you wouldn't want, who would want to write in different languages and different technologies? Like it's just, you wouldn't want to, but we're not there yet. I mean, that's just the reality. I do think that it's improving. Like today, it's way better than it was a year ago. It'll continue to get better. And so the sort of question which is really based off of your business is, okay, are you okay with the current difficulties? Does that even affect you? A lot of businesses, it doesn't. It doesn't matter whether certain things are slow or you don't have certain functionality. And are you okay kind of working through the deficiencies like that do exist today, that gap? And that's not an easy question, I don't think, for most people. And then on the other side, if you're going to buy into native, I mean, is it okay with the downsides there, which typically are, I mean, you have to typically get people that are sort of specialized in the area. Like it's usually more costly. And that's actually, man, I forget. I don't know if you saw this, Justin, but there was some company who came out with this, like the larger company came out with a study that they essentially got rid of all their mobile apps like a year ago or something, and just went like fully like web, like PWAs, like everything. And or maybe they used Cordova or something as well. Like, but they didn't do straight native, and they saved some large amounts of money because they didn't have to, like, both developers and some of the other costs associated with it.
Yeah, I saw that it was like a cost analysis type of thing, and they broke down how that changed their ecosystem. And yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
It'd be
One
interesting.
of the things I think about, it's funny because one of the other things I think about when I heard that announcement about this delivery of the partial app in the app store is, I mean, it kind of mirrors Angular Universal, right? In terms of, like, what if it was used that way? What if it was, okay, I'm going to grab this app, bam, I've got a functionally usable part of it right away, and then while the rest of it loads in the background, right? It's kind of the same pattern, right? I mean, if they took it to that pattern, that might be pretty neat. So then I could get up and running with the apps that I am deciding on going with faster.
Actually, this brings up one other topic that I didn't have down, but I thought was interesting from Google I/O. So they talked a little. It's something that I saw before, but I sort of ignored, to be quite honest. But once they started talking about it, I realized that there was a lot of weight behind it. So I've started to look into it more the past couple of weeks, which is Google's AMP specification, AMP. So have you heard about this, Justin?
Sounds familiar. Refresh me.
It's basically, okay, so taking a step back, where this is coming from is that Google for some time has placed a big emphasis on mobile for obvious reasons, that people are accessing the web through their mobile devices, more and more. I know for us personally at Get Human, on a daily basis, I think 70%, 75% of our users are on mobile devices. I mean, it's crazy. So they are in their search algorithms, in basically every way that they can. They've been trying to promote best practices, which include, the stuff like, making sure your images are sized right and whatever else. But this AMP specification is sort of this, I guess, taking what previously before was like a list of best practices, like, okay, you should do this because it'll provide a good user experience or whatever, to something where it's like codified almost, that it's like, okay, if your site does these very specific things, then basically they're going to promote it more through the search engine. Like, in essence, you're going to get more traffic to your site, like almost guaranteed. So there's a lot of benefits to implementing the specification. And the reason why that happens, just conceptually, it's that it does provide a better user experience, because your page loads much faster. The user can see everything right away. So it's a lot of stuff like making sure that your JavaScript and CSS that's needed above the fold is inlined, and everything else is deferred. I forget all the rest of them, but it's a whole list of stuff that isn't necessarily easy to implement, especially with an existing large app. So it definitely does take work, but I guess for sure, if you are, everybody who has publicly facing apps who cares about SEO should definitely read through it and check it out. It's definitely worth your time. And if you're building a new app, especially, you should be implementing your new app with this in mind. We've had to work backwards and kind of tack it on to what we currently have, which has been challenging, but we're improving actually. So yeah, if you want to see an example of not us fully there, but at least partially, if you go to gethuman.com now, you can start to see some of the fruits of our labor of it quickly loading, especially on slower devices. It's actually still pretty fast right now. So
nice. Yeah, so it's interesting in that topic. Thinking about it from as you develop any type of application, there's just so many things now that you have to be concerned about, and think about and track as you develop, and you're focusing these one things, and it's like, okay, I gotta hit this mark and this mark and this mark, right? And they're all things that you want to do, but you got the time, you got all these issues coming to play, right? So I wonder how something like that could be translated into like a linter or something that you could have as part of your code that says, hey, you haven't done this yet, so get on it, or suggesting these sort of things. That's part of that whole pipeline that allows you to say, okay, it's going to remind me, it's going to be in my face. I know I don't have time to get to it now, but when I get to the next 3 or 4 features that take my mind away from that, like I'll have something that's reminding me that, hey, yeah, don't forget, give this thing some attention, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah. On that point, I'm glad you brought that up. There's sort of 2 things there. One is that there are existing tools on the web to help kind of see some of that, which I'm sure you could hook into your build process if you want to, with Google Page Speed and then Web Page Test. That sort of has some of that information. I think in Webmaster Tools they have some stuff there too, but for sure Google Page Speed is a good source for that. And then some of the linting stuff that you brought up, actually, I forgot to mention, with the CLI integration that we're working towards, part of it is like initial scaffolding, part of it is like generating server-side, HTML pre-rendering, but part of it is linting. So there's a lot of cool stuff that they're using with Codalizer. Have you heard of Codalizer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's this kind of code analysis tool that they're using with the CLI to do all linting sort of stuff and just recommendations of hey, you should do this instead of this or whatever. So that's gonna be interesting. I'm just starting to get into that, but of basically what types of things we'll look for in your code to recommend, in terms of your universal app. But I have pretty high hopes that that's gonna help a lot as well.
Totally. Hey, I have a question for you on the CLI then, while we're talking about the topic really quick.
Sure, go for it.
So what's the concept of if I have additional, the CLI is doing all this build process and everything underneath the covers for me, right? If now I want to say, I got to add something to that, right? Is it just I add a gulp file and I can start adding gulp tasks and it's going to get picked up, or how do I add that into the mix, right?
So today it's not easy. So today it's sort of a closed, it's not as easy to add plugins, but that will be one of the goals. So they're working towards that, where my impression, and hopefully Mike doesn't kill me, Mike Bracco, with my framing of this, but my impression is that where we will eventually get to is where the core CLI, well, first of all, okay, good. Right now, everything is kind of one big chunk. So part of this process of making it expandable is actually breaking everything up, which is needed for a number of reasons. I mean, it's a huge download. If you try to install it yourself, it takes forever. And you don't need everything. So part of the refactoring that's going on right now is kind of breaking it up into all these small pieces, and then you just bring together the pieces that you want. And that what they're going for, that it's easily expandable, so that, yeah, similar to a gulp type of thing, when you add your gulp tasks that are custom for your stuff, you would build plugins on top of the CLI. I think the hope is that we'll be able to use this build platform that everybody is kind of pushed. We're trying to encourage everybody in the Angular community to use this common build platform, and hopefully that will kind of all get us to converge on a set of standards much quicker. Because with Angular 1, it took a while, right? Mm-hmm. And then part of that is just people's got to use it after a while, for sure. But even in spite of that, I just don't think there was as big of an emphasis on creating these common set of standards and best practices until John Papa came out with his style guide, which was only relatively recently, many years into the project. So I think they're trying to get ahead of that ball, and within the matter of I mean, what I would say is a year from now, where Angular 2 will be out by then, and a lot of this stuff there'll be production apps out. People will start to well, you're laughing.
I was crossing my fingers, hoping. Yeah. I'm assuming it will be, but let's hope. It will.
But the idea is that similar to what they sort of talk about in Ember world, I do think that it is a great value when you can look at somebody else's app in your ecosystem, and it's just familiar because you guys are kind of doing things in the same way. With Angular 1, you really can't do that. I mean, people are all over the map, right? But I think that I have high hopes that with Angular 2, we're going to all kind of be pushing together and come up with like a great way of building web apps that kind of everybody does things, somewhat similar.
Similar, yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
All right, next topic. Now, this is one that I actually did not get a chance to see any of the videos from, but React Europe was just recently, and React is obviously different than Angular. It is not the same thing. But I bring it up because typically, especially over the past, year or two, there's been a lot of stuff that's come out of React, especially the conferences, that gets folded back into Angular. So Justin, have you had a chance to watch any of the videos or highlights from React Europe?
I have not seen any of them yet, but one topic I'm really interested in is GraphQL.
Yep.
That's really interesting, especially in terms of how that applies to thinking about, we're building our application. We have these REST endpoints, right? All over for delivering our data. And that felt great and felt nice. But as that thing grows, it's like, oh man, you notice these pains and the things that GraphQL talk about solving in terms of not really hitting one particular endpoint, but being able to query it and dynamically grow. Like I can totally see a fit for that, for solving some of these problems that arise as to this rigidity of like this REST API type of thing and trying to solve that problem. So super interested in that, to see more on that.
So the GraphQL team is actually based in Boston, and it was funny. We had a meetup, the last Angular meetup that we had. Somebody was talking about comparing GraphQL and Falcor, and it was a super interesting talk. The guy did a great job, and I talked to the Facebook GraphQL person afterwards, and the thing I realized is that I mentally have a tough time I can see the value in it, like you were talking about, Justin. I mentally have a tough time getting over for my own needs. Like I just feel like I need to do things in like the REST sort of way, just because I've done it for so long and like I understand it, and I'm in my mind I'm like, okay, this GraphQL thing is interesting where it handles like all of the communication and you're kind of defining your data needs in like a different way. But I don't know. I just can't. It's hard for me to get over that mental hurdle, I guess. But I do think it's interesting. We are going to have a show just on GraphQL in the next month or so. We're still trying to finalize the scheduling of that. But I agree. Interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, and it's cool because you just have all these different ecosystems and these different platforms and languages and all these things that really are getting shared in terms of, okay, they're solving this over here and somebody solves this over there, and now, okay, that gives us a chance to think about how can we solve it over here. We're running that same problem over here, right? And now we can learn from what they've done or even adopt that and take that. It's that sharing of all that knowledge and stuff that's really cool. So you mentioned, React's out of the scope of Angular, but there's just goodness everywhere to try and pull from and learn from and stuff. So many problems to solve, right? And people are just solving these things in different ways and different times, and just learning that knowledge and stuff is great.
Yeah, and so for that reason, I would definitely encourage all Angular developers to watch the React videos, watch the stuff, even if it's not in the particular technology, like regardless of whether it's React or something else. Like whenever there's interesting discussions going on, it's typically something as far as the web technologies go that you can kind of fold back some sort of learning lesson or some type of thing back into what you're doing as well. So yeah, definitely recommend that. Actually, it's already near the end of our time here. So we'll skip over a couple things. I do want to let's just go over two quick things here right at the end. So I wanted to get to mention cancelable promises. Did you see this, Justin, that it went to stage 2 for the ECMA standards?
Yeah, I was checking that out. So it's getting close to being observables. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's this weird thing, I think. Like there's definitely a lot of discussion in the community because it's a heated topic. Like it seems like such a simple thing, like you're adding a cancel to a promise, right? But I probably won't pull in all sides of the discussion here, but I think part of it is the camp that just thinks, hey, promises are what they are. They're either resolved or not resolved. That's been the spec, and that's the way people have been implementing it. If you add this like additional thing of being able to cancel them, even though that functionally would be useful in some cases, it would fundamentally change what they do and would screw people up or whatever, like the existing implementations. But then the people on the other side are like, well, but this is something useful that we could do. Now, the counter argument to that, the usefulness is that, well, that's why you use observables, which has this functionality already. So like, I think people like Ben Lesh get frustrated because they've been trying to promote, more of the standardization and utilization of observables. And like, there's no need to kind of tack this on to promises. So do you have any thoughts on this area?
Yeah. So, it's like a tug, right? So it's a give and take. And it's from one aspect, you look at it just like that, okay, promises are doing this one thing that they're doing, right? And they fulfill that need. And so there could be scenarios where you could say, oh, well, that fits for that, right? Like I actually want to have that pattern and I'll use promises to do that, right? But then on the other side, you say, well, yeah, we expand this ability of what it can do. It's like, well, there's something else that can do that, right? So now you're like, they're kind of the same. So how does a person pick? Well, do I do a promise or an observable? Because they would both do the same gamut, right? But then on the flip side, it's like, well, okay, you got two things that do separate things, but now, hey, what if I do want to cancel something? So now I got to do observable. So now that means I got to bring in that library and bring in all that concepts and stuff into my app. So now I've got two combined where it would be nice to just have one that does kind of all the stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. We'll see where it shakes out.
Yeah.
But are you an observable guy? Are you a believer in reactive?
I'm a believer of a lot of things, right? So I do embrace that. I can embrace promises as well if needed. So,
okay.
But I do like that. I mean, in the Angular space, especially Angular 2 space, I mean, observables and starting to do some Redux stuff and stuff like that, and it's pretty slick. So
I'm trying to gauge where on the spectrum you are. So like you're starting to do Redux stuff. Are you doing RxJS or just basic Redux?
We're kind of playing around. We kind of like hand rolled an implementation of it, kind of based on the Redux RxJS type of stuff. So we got kind of something simple right now going for it to kind of get a feel for it. We're still kind of trying to understand that whole model of man, if our state is gigantic, right? We got this multiple tools and multiple things that we got to keep state on in this big giant monolithic app. Like, how does that fit into maintaining this state library on top of all of our other stuff and play through? But so there's like all these benefits of using it all, especially when you start talking about turning off and switching change detection and all this stuff, right? It feels right. It feels great, right? But then it's kind of like, okay, how does that play out in the story? So we're still kind of running through that, but
I think
definitely intrigued by it.
We're going to definitely dedicate another full show to that topic as well. I think it's something that a lot of people are looking at now. We are right at the top of our hour, and I'm about to get kicked out of this room. Justin, did you have any picks or anything that we missed that you wanted to plug?
The only thing I would say is that I just noticed that the docs on Angular.io that they're always improving. They're awesome. They now have this thing that next to like the classes or directives and stuff like that shows the stability of them. So I don't know if you noticed that yet.
Yeah.
Next to the class name is like stability, and I don't know how I feel about that because I go to some ones that I like a lot, and it's like stability unstable or red. And I'm like, oh, crap, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they're surfacing that. So I'd plug that.
My last thing is that I'm going to plug. You say I have a native script shirt on, and I'm plugging Nathan Walker. Created native script for the web. So he basically built a bunch of components in Angular 2 that can look at the native script syntax like a web view and then render it on the web. Definitely awesome. I'm going to include the link to that. Definitely check it out. So that's it for this week. I'm going to have the schedule for the next couple of weeks up hopefully by next week. and hope everybody enjoys the summer, has a great weekend. Talk to you later. Bye.
See you guys.